Deb Gonzalez. As the co-chair of the site committee, I want to first thank my tireless comrades for their generosity and commitment in pulling together our part of this conference. Ilima Long, Candice Fujikane, Cindy Franklin, Kealani Cook, Karen Kasasa, Noel Kahanu, Helena Kapuni Reynolds, and Jamaica Osorio. I should also actually add Hokulani Aikau, who really served on both the program and site committee. Even though she's only officially listed on the program committee, I think because we're the cool kids and she couldn't get enough of us. So this group envisioned the specifically decolonial direction of the excursions that accompany this conference. Ilima and Candice especially deserve the credit for conceiving the brilliantly decolonial intention of this opening plenary. So Scott Korashige and the program committee carved out plenary space so that we could mark the importance of this place, and asked us to organize a plenary mindful of the tensions and contradictions of holding an American Studies Association conference here in Hawaii. Our slate of speakers constitute a response to the conference theme that addresses the transformative aloha aina work of Kanaka Maoli and settler allies in this political moment, and illuminates the imagined and material alternative futures in the making on the Mauna and beyond. We're 118 days into the 2019 stand to protect Mauna Kea from the 30-meter telescope, and 126 years and 126 years of continued resistance and resurgence since the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy. This panel asks you to think beyond the image of paradise that is Hawaii's most dominant iconography, and instead understand this place as a site of refusal, of imagination, of action. There is something, indeed, being built on the Mauna and throughout the Pai'aina, but it is not a telescope. It is animated by a revolutionary and generative aloha inseparable from the Aina, the land, that which feeds. Many of you are visiting this place. We place then on you a responsibility to listen to the stories rooted here and to seek out panels with local scholars and activists who address what the fight looks like on these islands. Finally, after this panel, we invite you to engage with us in conversation at the welcome reception, the book signing event following this plenary, and to keep these provocative dialogues going over the next few days. Before we get started with this amazing cast of folks, I'd like to first welcome Laura Lyons, a longtime American Studies scholar, a professor in the English department at UH Manoa, interim dean, she has many titles, of the College of Languages, Linguistics, and Literature, and a wonderful colleague and friend. She's currently serving as Associate Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, and she's here to represent the UH Manoa Office of the Provost, the deans of the colleges at UH Manoa who have generously sponsored this plenary, and the welcome reception to follow. Please welcome Laura Lyons.
Aloha mai kākou. On behalf of the University of Hawaii at Manoa and the Provost's Office, it's my distinct honor to welcome you. In making opening remarks, it is typical and kind of part of the genre that we point out that the 10-campus University of Hawaii system is one of the most ethnically diverse institutions in the U.S., and that the University of Hawaii includes the only freestanding school of Indigenous knowledge at a major research university, Hawaii Nui Kea. This is a distinction we are proud of, but it is not so much an achievement as an aspiration that requires constant self-reflection about what we value and what our individual and collective responsibilities as faculty, staff, students, and administrators are to continue the struggles and work necessary towards more fully realizing what it means to be a Native Hawaiian place of learning. As you will know from the panels that the conference site committee put together, including the plenary that we are all here for, that struggle includes many things, but particularly Aina, land. And if you have heard excerpts of yesterday's testimony before the Board of Regents on the administrative rules for Mauna Kea, you will have a sense of how much is at stake in this struggle, not in institutional and academic terms, but for the people of these islands, and most especially for the Kanaka Maoli Native Hawaiians. It is rare that I give opening remarks at conferences for an organization of which I'm also a member. And so I'm reminded that I first attended ASA 20 years ago when it was in Montreal. I remember Kehaulani kind of rushing in from having heard testimony before the Supreme Court on the Rice versus Cayetano decision. I went to something every single session. I skipped lunch and coffee because I just couldn't bear to miss something. The sessions were that thought-provoking. Hawaii is a particularly suggestive place for understanding the many possibilities of this year's theme, Build as We Fight. At the noon panel, From Palestine to Hawaii with Decolonial Love, I felt that same sense of intellectual engagement and possibility that I felt in Montreal. Panelists talked about the difficult but also intimate, exhausting, and sometimes joyful work of solidarity without falling back on a complexity that leads to impasse or an optimism born more of wishful thinking than material reality. And that's what I think of as the hallmarks of talks at ASA. There was also a discussion of what a university can make possible and what it cannot. That was for me both sobering and inspiring at the same time. I want to thank both the program and the site committee for their work in putting together an incredible set of panels, discussions, and tours that I hope you will find both moving and instigating. I also want to thank the panelists you're about to hear, many of whom are colleagues and friends. Those are not mutually exclusive categories. I also want to thank all of those at Hawaii Kea and Native Hawaiian Student Services for the continued example they provide to all of us each day and over the decades of the necessity that as we work to decolonize the university and other spaces, we also build as we fight.
This chant that I just chanted, you could say, is our version of a land acknowledgement. Our version meaning the Kanaka Maoli people's version. This chant speaks to the lines of gods, chiefs, chiefly descendants, and maka'ainana, or the common people, whose culture, histories, religions, and political mana rise up like a mighty wave from the ocean. It speaks to the Kanaka Maoli people and our history of wayfinding across Mauna Kea, back and forth to great oceanic nations, settling in Hawaii and developing a thriving society filled with traditions and knowledge systems that sustain nearly 1 million people in these islands by the time of the arrival of European powers. Throughout the 19th century, our chiefs reformed traditional, cultural, and political institutions into a constitutional monarchy known as the Hawaiian Kingdom, and protected the sovereignty of our country against myriad imperialist nations who worked to carry out their interest on our shores. In 1893, a group led by white businessmen and sugar planters, mostly kingdom subjects, illegally overthrew the kingdom's reigning queen, Liliuokalani, after she announced the promulgation of a new constitution that would give more power to the people and to native governance. The overthrow was backed by U.S. Minister John L. Stevens, who landed U.S. Marines to ensure the success of the overthrow and who wanted Hawaii as a U.S. military outpost. To skirt a treaty, the only legal mechanism of annexing another country, annexationists in the U.S. Congress passed a joint resolution with a simple majority that claimed to annex the Hawaiian Kingdom. Annexation was nearly universally opposed by the majority of Kanaka Maoli citizens and subjects, as documented in the anti-annexation petitions housed in the U.S. Library of Congress and written about extensively by Kumu Noinoi Silva. As such, the Hawaiian Kingdom is an occupied country. Its territory remains clearly defined. It's the entire archipelago of all the Hawaiian Islands. Its national and native language, Olelo Hawaiʻi, is still spoken and is in a state of ongoing revitalization. Its institutions have in many cases been either suppressed or co-opted by the state of Hawaii, the settler state's civic operational arm of the US occupation, but Kanaka Maoli, as well as non-native descendants of kingdom subjects and also non-native settler allies, remain committed to restoring our institutions, our language, our cultural practices, our ability to determine how our lands are used, and ultimately our country and our sovereignty. This is found in the beginning of the program. It is the land acknowledgement, and it's something that I wrote to open up how we usually think about land acknowledgements, which, of course, I don't think I have to really explain to folks in this room, are very repetitive, are often obligatory, and are quite prescriptive. Was my description of our history a perfect, simple description? Well, I invite you to attend any of the sessions of the Kanaka scholars here to find out that no, it was not perfect and that simple. But it is ours, and many of us do consider this and understand this place to be our country under occupation. And so that so-called land acknowledgement is not there for anybody to read prior to their paper. It is not there to tell people exactly what to say, but it's there for folks who are here to take some time to contemplate the fact that they are not in America, and to give thought to the specificities and the nuances and the similarities and the overlaps of our particular occupation here in Hawaii. Okay. My name is Ilima Long, and I am a PhD student in the Political Science Department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. For the sake of this panel, I'm a member of HULI, the Hawaii Unity and Liberation Institute, which is in service to Hawaiian struggle by providing nonviolent direct action trainings, and which provides substantial logistic and strategy support on the Mauna at Puʻuhonua o Puʻuhuluhulu. I am among my kumu and mentors who sit here next to me and down there, Candace, and I'm going to provide a preliminary introduction to them that is on my terms and in the way that they are meaningful to our people and our Lāhui. And it is not written down. This is what I know about these people who I think about and learn from a lot. So right here to my right, this is Dr. Professor Kumu John Osorio. He's the Dean of Mauna Kea School of Hawaiian Knowledge. He is my kumu. My family calls him Jonathan because our families grew up together, Catholic families in Keaukaha on the Big Island. His work, along with Kumu Noinoi Silva's, is among the canon of Hawaiian studies. His book, Dismembering Lāhui, opens up all Hawaiian studies students thinking to the relationship between law and colonialism, and also to the ways in the immensity of weight that our chiefs carried upon them as they had to figure out what to do with imperialism upon their shores. He is a freedom fighter. He is a defender of our national lands that were seized at the time of the overthrow, still fighting for those. And he is a beloved kupuna who has also put his body on the line up there on Mauna Kea to block the Mauna from construction vehicles. Next to Kumu John is Kumu Noinoi Silva, Dr. Professor Noinoi Silva, who also is my kumu, my mentor, and her book, Aloha Betrayed, uncovered for the first time for many of us that our people did not give away our country and that our queen did not give away our country, and that what we did actually was organize our asses off. That's what our kupuna did at the end of the 1800s. Her bringing to light the Kūʻe petitions, the anti-annexation petitions, provided as much of an awakening that has incredible impact and that has led us in part to where we are today, an incredible awakening that allowed us to trace our literal names to the names of our kupuna, our ancestors who signed petitions saying we oppose annexation to the United States. And that contribution, I believe, to the overall Hawaiian sovereignty movement is not highlighted enough. She also set the standard for research in Hawaiian history, that it must meaningfully engage the Hawaiian language archive. And she has forced us to all be better scholars and speakers because of that. To Kumunoinoi's right is Kumunoilani, Goodyear Kaupua, doctors, professors. I feel like I have to give a little bit of academic title up here. She is also a kumu, a mentor, and a friend. She is a co-mama to my daughter. Our daughters have been raised together. They both attend public Hawaiian language immersion school. She is committed. She is the professor who brings feminist thought into Indigenous teachings, into classrooms of students who've never even thought about what that word means, or they think they hate that, and she opens it up. And she has done so much to honor the legacy of activism among our Lāhui, and has also dedicated her life to free, public Hawaiian education, which remains at the tip of the spear and sort of progressive and ahead of its time in terms of the larger conversations around education in Hawaii. And to her right, well, actually, I'm going to save you for last, Auntie Pua. Okay, sorry. And then we have, okay, down here, we have, many of you are familiar with her, Kumu Candace Fujikane, who is a professor in English, that was my first major until I switched to Hawaiian studies, sorry. But it wasn't because of your class. Your class was awesome. So Professor Fujikane taught me about ideology, and she taught me about Asian settler colonialism, and she also taught me that that didn't have to be a thing that divides us as people of Hawaii, but that it's something that allows us to have honest conversations that bring us together. She is also a staunch kiaʻi for the Mauna. All of these people are. And I forgot to mention that Noinoi, and actually everybody here has put themselves on the line for the Mauna. Noinoi has been up as a kupuna, sitting in the kupuna tent on the front line. Kumunoilani locked herself down to the cattle guard for 8 hours. And Candace Fujikane has been there every step of the way for the legal fight as well. And then finally, we have Kumu Puʻuhonua, who is a kumu hula, who is all of our kumu, who is the queen, she doesn't like being talked about like this. She is a queen kiaʻi of our sacred Mauna Kea. She is from Waimea. She has raised 2 wonderful daughters who are also kiaʻi. And Auntie Pua has done more to instill new political thought in the realm of activism and sovereignty through her teachings of kapu aloha, through her spiritual generosity that she has shared with all of us and demanded that we carry ourselves a certain way. I promise you that next year this time there will be many long, lengthy papers talking about the impacts of kapu aloha and talking about kapu aloha as Hawaiian political thought as well. And it is, yeah, AO. So I don't want to take up too much more time because I've just been just talking about my kumus. But the reason I wanted to introduce my kumus in this way is because this relationship, this relationality, these are my kumus, these are my family's friends, these are my community members, these are my cultural practitioners and mentors, and this is the relationship that we all hold with each other. And the way that education flows through these relationships, the way that commitment and support flows through these relationships is exactly what has brought us to this moment. And it is exactly why we are so strong in this moment. 118 days, it's not just of an issue or of a campaign, it's of blocking that road from construction vehicles against an entire state apparatus that is just out of their minds trying to figure out what to do with us. We are too educated, we are too clear, and we are too strong, and they don't know what to do with us, and it is because of these relationships. And with that said, we are going to turn it over to our first speaker, Auntie Pua Case, who will be followed by Kumujano Sorio. Mahalo.
Aloha kako. I have 20 minutes to give you the best that I can about the Mauna. So what I did before I came in this room is I put a little handy-dandy fact sheet on Protect Mauna Kea Instagram, my personal Facebook page, just go to Pua Case, because I don't want to talk about any of that if you don't mind. But if you don't have a background on Mauna Kea, you really need one in order to fully embrace. But in 20 minutes, I was thinking about what's the most important thing that I can talk about. So I'm going to start this way. Almost every day for the last 118 days, I've stood with a microphone in my hand. Not once a day, but 3 times a day. I get up in the morning, every morning, and at 7:30, myself and Dr. Noi Noi Wong Wilson, who really is the queen. I'm just the Mama Mauna, but that woman is the queen. She and I go and meet with the doe care officers. And we get an update, and where we meet is right up there at the top where those last cars are, and that tent. And at 8 o'clock, we begin protocol. And protocol is the means in which we anchor to our commitment, how we are going to sustain and maintain ourselves in a manner in which our ancestors would be proud of. And that just happens to be called kapualoha. Kapualoha is a deep self-respect. It's a reverence. It's sacred mountain, sacred conduct. And I have said that 3 times a day for 118 days. Sacred mountain, sacred conduct. So I begin by saying, O Pua Case ko uinoa. My name is Pua Case. I come from Waimea, Mokua Keawe. I'm going to center on maybe 2 things, an overall mo'oku auhau, which is a genealogy to this Mauna, which is really why we do what we do, and maybe a little bit about mo'olelo, or storytelling. I'm going to give you experience, and I'm going to just ask you to let your heart open to that. And whatever the reason is that you're here, or if it's an academic conference or what law, I was a middle school teacher for over 20 years. I know what it's like to be in an academic setting. I quit in 2015 when my older daughter called me from Mauna Kea on April 2nd and said, Mom, I'm heading up the mountain and the police are chasing me and I think I'm going to get arrested today. Now just think about if that was your child. And I looked at my students just like I'm looking at all of you right now. And I said, I quit. And I was teaching in the same school that I went to from kindergarten. I know how important education is. but I also know how important it is to stand for what I truly know, not just believe in. So what I truly know is, if we don't stand for the most sacred, what are we going to stand for? And if we don't stand now, when will we? So when anyone asks me, what can I do to help you, I say, do more than you're doing now. That means I leave it open. So every day, 3 times a day, I'm on that roadway over there. And I really feel like I need to be closer to my Mauna and not get hooked up. So let me tell you about this morning. Got up this morning, dressed in my army fatigues, my boots, my sweatshirt, and I headed down to Hilo, and I went to Ken's Pancake House, and I changed in the bathroom. You know, because I wasn't going to put this on up the Mauna, and I headed to the airport. That's life on the Mauna. So what do we mean about life on the Mauna? First, I'm going to ask you to simply do this. And again, 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a glimpse, you guys. I'm not going to fill your whole heart, and I'm not going to fill your whole plate. I'm just going to give you a glimpse into what life is like on a Mauna, and then you can follow up with the facts of why, what. So, on this ala, on July 12th, tell you how a movement begins. A movement begins most times, if you're in a movement, you know what I'm talking about, secret meetings. Ever been in a secret meeting? Oh yeah, secret meeting to ask who would stand, who would come to this parking lot right here on July 12th. And we thought maybe 50 people would come to our secret meeting. We even said it's so secret, don't wear your Mauna regalia, don't have your flags waving, let's come in like completely secret. And why were we meeting? Because after 10 years of 2 contested cases, 2 Supreme Court hearings, 1 frontline action in 2015, and I've never had a day off in 10 years from this Mauna, and that means my family hasn't either. So after all of that, the governor declared that construction could begin. And when he declared that, we said, secret meeting. So when we got there, we're like, maybe 50 people gonna come. Well, maybe 300 people came. But they came with their flags waving, and they came with their shirts on. We just couldn't do that. It wasn't as secret as we thought it was, and poos were blowing, and we were like, we got something. We got something here. And that night, about 30 people went up with their cars. And we sanctioned this parking lot, a Puʻuhonua, which means a safe place. So I hope if you're standing in a movement, you need a safe place. You need a recognized sanctuary. And I can't even go into all of that, sorry. But I'm going to move on. So we established our Puʻuhonua, our sanctuary, which now houses our food, our information, our medics, and our university. So we established ourselves on July 12th and on July 17th. As many of you know, 38 of our kupuna were arrested. Now, if you're in a movement, maybe I'm going to give you a little how-to and what's working for us. If you're in a movement, I firmly believe you're going to be successful if your elders support you. But even more, if your elders are fully participating. And even more, if your elders take their place. If they take the place that they held in times past, when they truly mattered, and their wisdom guided everything that you did. That's what we have on the Mauna. So on July 17th, our elders said, we are not moving. Why did they say that? Because for many of them, for the first time in their lives, they felt it. You know what they felt? possible victory. They felt that if they stood for the mountain, some of them, they were undoing all the wrongs before. And they were making up for all the times they couldn't stand. So they said, we stand. And I was on the microphone that day on July 17th. How many of you were there? Anybody was there that day? Because you know what, you know how truthful I gotta be. Could you stand, please, if you've been on the ala? If you have stood for Mauna Kea in this past 118 days and you've been on the ala, please stand, because you guys are gonna hold me accountable. That's right. Now I'm going to say, if you've supported the Mauna from anywhere, can you please stand so I can see who you are? If you have supported Mauna Kea, can you stand, please? Because that's for you. Kukia I Mauna. E o. E hu e. So I have to do that, because then all the rest of you know that I can't say anything that is not true. Because I got too many of you inside here that know that didn't happen. Right? So I like to see how many, you know. And when a room stands like that, makes me want to weep. It just makes me want to weep. Because this is the time we're in, when there's never going to be a last one, and we are not alone. When even a room like this, not even on the Mauna, we have people standing. So on July 17th, the kupuna said to me, this is our turn. None of you young people, we don't want to see any young people ever getting arrested. Now, that's not always possible, but that's what they said. And they said, our life almost over already. Our turn. And don't you make big noise when we're getting arrested. You guys be quiet, because this is our moment. So if you watch that, you're going to see us only responding to them. If they were chanting, we were chanting, but we were mostly silent. And when people question that, how could we be silent? You see, you know how Facebook is and social media, always a question, always a criticism, always a namu. It's because the kupuna told us, because it was their moment. Isn't that beautiful? They had their moment, and they took it. And they've been there ever since. They've been there ever since. So something that works for us on the ala, if you're running, and when I mean ala, I mean that roadway. If you're running a revolution or part of a revolution, I don't call myself a leader on that ala. None of us do. Others might, but we don't. You know how when you say there's a leader, swift it comes to take that leader down. We say the Mauna, the mountain is the leader. The mountain is the elder, the grandparent, the teacher, the guide, the protector, and the corrector. And how can you not stand if that is your Mauna? So before I go on, and I really only have a few minutes, if I say, o Mauna Kea, ko o Mauna, I want you to put your mountain where Mauna Kea is, unless Mauna Kea is your mountain. And really think about the mountain, the waterway, the river, the land base, your life way, that you would protect with all your might, with everything within you. You would sacrifice if someone came to destroy it, desecrate, construct something that is way too massive. Every day, we recommit to the Mauna by saying, what is our goal and our purpose? To stop 18 stories of any kind from going anywhere on our Mauna, over our water source, over our spiritual temple, over our fragile ecosystem and landscape. Who cannot understand that? When a people have said enough is enough. When you already have taken the summit, We will do whatever it takes. So how do we do it? You're going to hear that word kapualoha and probably write about it. Because we have people coming from around the world, you guys. Every day, yeah? If you've been on the ala, when they come, it's chants and prayers. It's dances, so we anchor deep and love one another. And then it's formal gift giving and exchange. And if you've been on the ala, when someone has come from Africa, or Venezuela, or Colombia, or Aotearoa, or Tonga, or Samoa, or North Carolina, or Nantucket, or Washington, D.C., or from Standing Rock, or from the Winnemem-Wintu, or from the Ohlone, you know what I mean. The world is watching. Why? Because we have to stand in a manner that the mountain would expect, command, and demand from us. So I'm born and raised on that Mauna. You could say that I've been a water protector my entire life. Why? Because my father was in charge of the water for Parker Ranch my whole life. And you know what that meant? That meant that I rode in the truck with him. I skipped school to do that. I did it all summer long because I knew that was what was important. And I looked for water. And I was raised that way. For the last 10 years, I've been in everything, but I'm not there the longest by far. There are many others who have stood before me, still standing, still sitting in that kupuna tent, who are not going anywhere. So I'm going to just tell you where we're going from here. So if you're live streaming, no live stream this kind of things, you know. Because we're waiting for frontline action. Me, just a middle school teacher, I'm a mother, a daughter, ranching family, ranching and plantation. I'm waiting for the next frontline action. When is that going to occur? I don't know. When they figure it out. When they figure out how they're going to arrest the whole world. That's when. And I don't know when that attempt is going to be made. But 5 countries cannot and will not, through the University of Hawaii, come to the last of the biggest sacred temple we have and build on it and take that from us. Because you're not only taking it from us, but you're taking it from all of you. Once upon a time, Chief Arvil Looking Horse, you ever heard of him? Pipe carrier. Told me at a water ceremony, Pua, just like that. If you know him, Pua, don't you lose your water. Because if you lose, we all lose. He wasn't talking about the physical water. He was talking about the spirit of water. He was talking about the essence of water, the prayer of water, the soul of water, the life of water. And when he said that to me, inside I just said, uh-oh. Talk about pressure, right? But on the outside, I said, don't worry, we won't. Don't worry, we won't. So we're almost at how many days? 120, aren't we? We're at 118 today. We've made a commitment, for those of you who haven't been following, or even if you have, we've made a commitment to be there as long as it takes. This morning's conversation with the Doe Care officers was about what we're going to do for Christmas. Can't we all just go home? And we said, you guys go, because we're not going unless there's an end to this. So my younger daughter and I bought Christmas lights, and we put it up in our tent yesterday, just in case. You know, we just started getting our mind thinking, whoa, it's hot in the day there, but it's damn cold at night. But we're getting ready for that. The administrative rules were passed yesterday. That's a kind of a mau for me, common. You think that when I walked in there, I didn't know it would be passed? Of course I knew that, because they have to. Why? Because they have to build it. They will do whatever it takes because they've made promises. And there's so much more I could say about that, but they have to. So when I went in there yesterday, there was brilliant testimony. So if you were there and you testified, thank you. And at the end of the day, when they passed this, I said, maybe it's meant to be. Let's let that fuel our fire. Let's have that make us rise like a bigger wave than you ever thought and you never see coming, because we are a mighty wave. So at the beginning of every day, 3 times a day, we commit to the mountain. And I'm going to I know my 20 minutes is probably just about up, and I will not take anybody else's minutes ever, because these guys are my comrades, my teachers, and my friends. So this is the way we close 3 times a day. And I'm sorry if you wanted more from me, or, you know, I didn't hit on what you wanted or what you came here for. 20 minutes, man. I'm a lifetime on the Mauna. You know what I mean? I don't know what you guys expect in 20 minutes or 10. But, you know, we can give, you guys know. You've been up here probably for a 20-minute. You know, it's like this much. So I'm just going to say, where's the 2-minute warning? So I know. I got 2 minutes. You know, you gotta watch me here, because this is this is my day, you know, with this microphone. So this is the way we end, 3 times a day, every single day, times 118 days. I say, we are the natives of this land. We call upon you, our Pacific Island relatives, those of you who come from faraway places, who are standing for your own lands, your own waters, your own oceans, your own rivers, your own lifeways. And you, our friends, our allies, our comrades, we leave no one out on the ala. We are here to aloha aina, love this Mauna like no other, because this is what we are standing for right now, with our feet on the ground. We are the pillars from the 4 cardinal points. We descend from beloved warriors. We descend from those fierce in the love of our land. We are the guardians who stand strong as mountains, unshakable. We are the rock standing. We are the foundation under our feet. We are the protectors of the waters of Mauna Kea, and we will rise like a mighty wave. And that is Mauna Kea. So I'm just going to have you end with me, because I know those of you who have been on the Mauna, don't you miss it? Are you guys missing the Mauna right now? Oh, yes, you are. I know it. I can feel it. Yeah. So this is the way we end. I say hu e, and you say hu. Hu means to rise, not like a rogue wave, but you know that wave. You know that wave when you all in sync, when you all in harmony. When you can feel it, you can hear it, you can sense it, and you can smell it. That wave, that's us. So here we go. Eh, hoo, eh. Eh, hoo, eh. Eh, hoo, eh. Hoo. We coming for you like a mighty wave. Eo, mahalo.
My friends and I would sometimes roam trails of Mauna Kea, and in the evening we'd come home to see her standing there. The moon moves around her when she sleeps. The clouds stand beside her when she weeps. And I could be forgotten and 1,000 miles away, and still I would recall the beauty of Mauna Kea. And I live in the city now, and I see different things. In the night when I'm alone, she's in my dream. The wind spins around her when she wakes. The sun spreads his warmth across her face, and I could be forgotten and 1,000 miles away, and still I would recall the beauty of Mauna Kea. Now to any land you go, she will be with you if you love her like we do. Mauna Kea, Mauna Kea, Mauna Kea. Please give me a minute. I want to say a couple of things before I begin and read. I'm going to read something from an introduction to a book that I finished about 2 months ago. I've read this before in front of students and faculty at the law school at UH. I'm doing this today because I'm really kind of overwhelmed with a number of different things. And actually one of the things that really overwhelmed me was your introduction, and to be included in this company of people that I have so much a love for, and so much trust in, and so much faith in. I've never ever had a more gratifying introduction in my life. So, the thing I'm actually writing an introduction for, and will be included along with a piece written by my daughter, Jamaica Heoli Mele Ikalani Osorio, and by Nalani Minton as well, is a book that recreates the petitions from the Hui Alohaina. And so in talking about that here, and I can't see all of you, so I'm going to stand. In talking about that here, I want to say that looking at this table and looking at Pua and looking at Candace and all of you, Ilima, we have been involved in a very long struggle. And our association and companionship and comradeship and faith in one another goes back now more than 30 years. And I want to say to everyone that's gathered here that comes from many places in academia and many parts of the United States and perhaps many parts of the world, that if you are ever fortunate enough to be in the company of such people, to have your work held up to their scrutiny and their expectations, you really couldn't ask for more in a life. So this is what the introduction says, and really, believe me, I read this in part because I don't think that I can emotionally get through this otherwise. The 25 years since Professor Noinoy Silva began the investigation of the 1897 petitions at the National Archives has been a whirlwind of activity and accomplishments for the Hawaiian people. Writing in this late summer of 2019, with thoughts of Mauna Kea and Kapu Aloha at the forefront of everyone's conversations, it occurs to me that the celebrity of this moment is the only thing that is different from countless other moments our Lāhui has shared in this time, building and strengthening our nation. By the time this book goes to press, the issue of the 30-meter telescope may have been resolved, and we may have already gone on to other things. But I am certain that the effort to reclaim our aina, our land, and our government will have in no way abated. In the same way that events such as the Onipa'a commemorations in 1993 of the Queen's surrender and the International Tribunal indicting the United States that the late Kekuni Blaisdell organized in Hawaii were moments that brought our people together. The 1897 petition drive conducted by the Hui Aloha and the Hui Kalai'aina were similar self-recognitions, similar gestures of defiance and unity. The fact that the submission of these two petitions did not ultimately prevent the United States from territorializing Hawaii is no more significant than the fact that Onipa'a did not produce an independent or quasi-independent government, or that the Ho'okoloko'onui's findings brought no widespread international condemnation of the United States. For some, this is evidence of a historical truth, that power is all that matters, and that America's grip on our land and laws is its own justification. Yet, America's global influence in 2019 is nothing like it was in 1897, when it enshrined freedom and democracy in its civil society, and when its reputation as an exception to European imperialism gave American presidents from Wilson to Obama a remarkable ability to shape global events, not only militarily, but through a standing as a nation committed to law and rule by the people. Kanaka Maoli have always been able to expose the fraudulence of that American discourse by demonstrating the contradiction between its words and actions, and in several important ways has actually brought out the better part of American ideals as well as a result. Excuse me. The Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana's strategy to force American military operations to halt in the 1970s by placing activists on the island may not have worked perfectly, but it is doubtful that the same tactics would have been as useful if the occupying nation was France, Britain, or the Soviet Union. And it was the Navy's submittal to growing public opposition and to the courts in 1980 that produced this consent decree, sharing Kaho'olawe with the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana that signaled the eventual restoration of that island. Similarly, the kiaʻi Mauna in 2015 and 2019 have been able to leverage the state's military and police power against itself with kapu aloha and aloha aina philosophies and behavior that are not public relations tactics, but a deep wellspring of beliefs, attitudes, and conduct to which many people, including police officers and non-Hawaiians, respond. In displaying the inadequacy of physical force to deal with a disciplined, courageous, and nonviolent opposition, the Hawaiian movement again forces Americans to see not only the hypocrisy of so much of their rhetoric, but also to understand that their own professed values and beliefs can bring them to act in ways that ennoble them. In 1897, the reading of the anti-annexation petitions was sufficient to cause 8 senators to change their vote to annex Hawaii from yea to nay, and forced the architects of Hawaii's acquisition to resort to a cheap political tactic, the Newlands Resolution, to fashion its legal pretense that it had gotten Hawaii lawfully. Some have argued that the petitions did not change the outcome, but that is true only if one is looking at the ability of the U.S. to take control of the Hawaiian nation in 1900. Consider what the petitions mean over the course of the next century, as we have gone from a population nadir of around 38,000 people, disillusioned with America and increasingly dispirited by a colonial education and assimilation, to a well-informed and assertive national movement that can bring close to that number, 38,000 people, to a lonely mountain access road week after week to feed, shelter, entertain, and educate one another. It is true that our country did not possess the weaponry or the appetite for war that would have been required to defend our government against the Americans. That is true in 2019 as well. But so is our refusal to forsake each other. It is interesting to think that we are probably less like one another than we were in 1897. There are Christian Hawaiians coming to Puʻuhuluhulu who support other Kanaka in their efforts to honor ancestral akua. Many speak Olelo Hawaii, others English, others Pidgin. where the 1897 petitions were narrated in Hawaiian, and where the majority of the 38,000 in 1897 had only Kanaka Maoli ancestors, the majority today could have a half dozen nationalities represented in their mo'okuauhau. Politically, we are probably more diverse than we were in 1900, when the Hawaiian Home Rule Party, which championed loyalty to the Queen and opposition to annexation, easily took control of the territorial House and Senate. Today, we are not politically unified, as many observers have noted, some dolefully, and others with a kind of smug conviction that our apparent divisiveness is the cause rather than the result of our electoral incapacity. But we know better. We know that our political activism is the most visible and effective political activity in Hawaii and has been for at least 3 generations. Despite being outnumbered 5-1 in our own country, we have increased the presence and prestige of our language, literature, and history, slowed the urbanization of Windward Oahu, ended the bombing of Kaho'olawe, and have turned Mauna Kea into a major staging of our vitality and determination, while halting a billion-dollar project that few people thought could be halted. That, of course, is the lesson of the Kū'e petitions. 22,000 Hui Aloha Aina signatures and 17,000 Hui Kalai Aina signatures were not going to have the legal muscle of the 90 senators and 357 congressmen in Washington, D.C. Nor do I think that there were many Kanaka who believed that their signatures would soften the hardened hearts of the Republican-dominated 54th Congress. But that was only part of the point anyway. In the end, the Kū'e petitioners did not despair because of the smallness of their numbers. They took heart in the knowledge that virtually every Kanaka they knew had signed along with them. As of this writing, I do not know how many Kanaka Maoli have visited the Puʻuhonua at Puʻuhuluhulu. I do not know how many will make the pilgrimage. But what I know is that what is drawing us to the Mauna is not only opposition to the telescope. It is our attraction to one another. It is our need to be, to experience, and to act together. It is not just defiance that drives us, just as it was not only defiance that led our kupuna, almost every one of them, to sign those petitions in 1897. These are profound gestures of love and solidarity, and one in which the telescope, like the American takeover, like statehood, like federal recognition, are all rendered quite meaningless and unimportant. We will not forsake one another. We know this already. And it is time the Americans know this too.
Thank you so much, John. Our next speaker will be Noenoe Silva, followed by Noelani Gujir Kaupua.
Aloha Aina. I want to begin by honoring Kumupua Case for many, many long years of commitment to protecting Mauna Kea and as a force whose vision and poetic prowess has the ability to move thousands to join kiaʻi in ensuring that Mauna Kea will never be damaged further. I want to honor the kupuna who have been up there all these days. It's harsh. Those of you who have been up there, who have spent the night up there, it's freezing cold. They're on a road. They're on asphalt. I want to honor all of them. And I want to honor the people who on July 15th, the brave kiaʻi who chained themselves to the grate, like Noelani, and my other comrade at work, Heoli Osorio. What we've seen since July this year is an unprecedented uprising across the entire Paeʻaina of Kanaka Maoli, united in the protection of our land. Mauna Kea, as Kumupua eloquently explained, is particularly sacred. All of our land, however, is sacred in the sense that our aina are our kupuna. They're our ancestors. They precede us in the cosmogonic genealogies to which all of us trace our origins. The kiaʻi movement has inspired thousands of Kanaka because first, Kumupua and the other Kumuhula and the other kiaʻi proceed from Kanaka ways of thinking and being in the world. To do our pule, our prayers to our own deities in our own language, to incorporate hula as prayer, to truly follow the guidance of kupuna, and to constantly reflect on and act according to the philosophies of our ancestors. These touch the na'au of hundreds of thousands of Kanaka and other people across the globe, and we rise up in response. Our akua, aumakua, and kupuno kapo answer these prayers daily on the Mauna. I've been seeing the word resurgence used in the ASA program and emails. I want to say that the Kukiaʻi Mauna movement at the blockade and at Puʻuhonua, Puʻuhuluhulu is really the first really mass action of Indigenous resurgence that I've seen in Hawaiʻi. Resurgence is not the same as cultural revitalization, although that is a necessary part of it. Resurgence is an idea that calls upon Native peoples to claim our lives as Natives in contention with the states that oppress us. The University of Hawaii is a site of contention and resurgence in this movement. The university holds the lease for the land, contracts for the TMT, and receives astronomy grants tied to the TMT, among other things. UH is also the PICO of the Hawaiian language revitalization movement and Kanaka-centered education that creates the people who are prepared to resurge our native ways of life. Past administrations have more or less supported these programs. The current administration calls our university a Hawaiian place of learning. That's in scare quotes. While ignoring our continual attempts to educate them that aloha aina is the central belief of our Lāhui, and that it is crucial to stop the construction of the TMT. Since July 17th, when 38 or so kupuna were arrested for blocking the Mauna Kea access road, the kiaʻi at the university, at Manoa, and I'm sure at the other campuses too, have repeatedly confronted, spoken to, testified at Board of Regents meetings as yesterday, emailed, and communicated with the people in power at the highest levels of the UH administration. Since July 17th, literally hundreds of people have exhorted, demanded, and pleaded with President David Lasner and the Board of Regents to issue a simple statement condemning the use of violence by the state in order to build the TMT. These include a letter crafted by Mari Matsuda and signed by a roster of the most highly respected non-Kanaka professors and former UH administrators. These communications go unanswered. None of us has received even an acknowledgement that an email was received. So now I want to tell you a cautionary tale from our history. In the late 18th century, the ali'i among our ancestors were warring with each other for control over the various islands. The powerful ruler, king, I guess you could say, the mo'i of Maui, Kahekili, agreed that his adopted son, Kahahana, would come to Oahu here and rule at the request of the highest chiefly advisors, the kahuna. Kahekili, however, wanted to rule Oahu along with Maui himself, so he plotted against his adopted son. First, Kahekili advised Kahahana to give the lands of Kualoa to him along with the whale ivory that washed up there. Kahahana's advisor, the kahuna, who put him in power in the first place, told him, if you give away Kualoa and the whale ivory, your authority will be lost and you will cease to be a ruler. And I don't really have time to explain what that all means, but.
It's true, though. It's really true.
So Kahahana listened to his advisor, Ka'opulupulu, and he refused this first request, but Kahekili kept on plotting. So Pukui's translation of Kamakau's account says, Kahekili coveted Oahu for its rich lands, many walled fish ponds, springs, and kalo patches. So a few years after the first request, Kahekili came back to Kahahana, and he asked him again for Kualoa, but this time he lied, and he said that the kahuna, his advisor, Ka'opulupulu, was the one that was plotting against him. This time, Kahahana listened to Kahekili, and he abandoned the advice of his should-have-been trusted advisor. Pukui translates, Ka'opulupulu came in vain to remonstrate with him, and the kahuna and all his followers, relatives, and members of his household tattooed their knees as a sign of the chief's deafness to his admonitions. Sorry, I got to turn the page. So the word kuli means both knee and deaf. For this act that embarrassed this willfully deaf chief, Ka'opulupulu and his son were killed. But not long afterwards, Kahekili succeeded in taking Oahu away from Kahahana. So I don't want to stretch this analogy too far, especially because the UH administrators and regents are not our ali'i. But I do want to point out that our ancestors were wise to repeat this story time and again when individuals in power fail to listen, not only to their own advisors, but to their people when they speak en masse. For many years, Kanaka faculty and staff have organized ourselves into councils on each campus to advise our chancellors and into a system-wide council to advise the president. David Lasner has chosen to ignore the advice of these councils. I'll also add that in the American system, executives are expected to acknowledge emails sent to them, aren't they? What explains this willful failure to communicate? What should the consequences be? If a president refuses to communicate with his faculty, staff, and students and refuses to hear the advice of the Kanaka councils, is he still fit to govern? Should we start impeachment hearings? It's a similar situation with the Board of Regents. They have heard hundreds of faculty, staff, and students testify against the TMT and also ask them to condemn the use of violence. The regents can sit for hours and hear our testimonies. They just sit there. I think they must view it as something unpleasant they just have to sit through, like going to the dentist. They ignore everything that is said. They say nothing back. They do nothing but go on with their plans to try to get the TMT built anyway. The genius of our ancestral ways is the practice of aloha. In the face of violent actions by the state and the continuous insult of being ignored by David Lasner and the Board of Regents, kiaʻi on the Mauna and on the campuses have remained in kapualoha. We will continue to rise and to protect our aina in peaceful ways. But as we do so, we cannot help but observe that rather than leading the university to become a Hawaiian place of learning, they have led themselves into a crisis of contradictions by extolling our value but ignoring our wisdom. Wow.
Belina ke aloha kākou. It's a great honor to be up here speaking with these amazing kumu, and I learn from them every day about what it means to live aloha aina. So I hope that I can follow them in a good way. Wahine have been protecting Mauna Kea since time immemorial. Wahine is a word that's loosely translated as women with an X. And I want to just preface this by saying that by highlighting in my talk the ways that Wahine have been central in this movement, I'm not trying to minimize Kane. Just highlighting Wahine. Deities embodied as forms of water, snow, mist, lakes, springs, storms, reside on and give life to the Mauna. Poliahu, Lili Noi, Waiau, Kahopo Kane, all of these akua are wahine. Among the elders arrested on July 17th were women who have for years been leading seasonal ceremonies on Mauna Kea to honor these and other deities on the Mauna. When police told the elders sitting on the road that law enforcement was going to come harder, faster, and with more force, lines of wahine formed the front line of defense between these elders and the police. In those mana wahine lines, we chanted, sang, recited poetry. We called out to the uniformed men in sunglasses and in riot gear, "Brothers, before you arrest us, know who we are. We are the educators that teach your children. We are the doctors, the nurses, the healers who care for your families. We are the counselors who help our people work through the cultural trauma that we carry. We are farmers, fishers, accountants, filmmakers, technicians, waitresses, writers, storytellers, students. We are your sisters, your mothers, your aunties, your daughters. Arm in arm, mana wahine flowing in more ways than one. We prepared to be hit with pepper spray, sound cannon, and baton, and then news from Oahu broke the intense standoff. A convoy of cars was stopping traffic on the major highway here in Honolulu. With Hinale Moana Wang at the helm, Mahu, which can be roughly translated as transgendered, Mahu and queer Kanaka led the convoy. "Mana Mahu!" our wahine line yelled in jubilation. The police eventually withdrew, and the governor realized that whatever happened to kiaʻi on the Mauna would trigger responsive actions in the major economic centers on Oahu and Maui. Now, almost 4 months into this 2019 round of protection of our sacred Mauna, Wahine, Mahu, LGBTQ folks continue to play major leadership roles in this movement and at the Puʻuhonua on the Mauna. People of all genders are critical to the functioning of this place of refuge that has hosted thousands over the last few months. Not surprisingly, though, the important responsibilities that Wahine and Mahu carry has been under-recognized. Women and Mahu organize and run various parts of the camp: the check-in tent, the kitchen, the kupuna council, the child care tent, the Mana Mahu tent, the organic university that has sprung up on the lava fields at the base of Puʻuhuluhulu, coordinating medics, coordinating media, donations, kupuna care. All of these are organized and led primarily by women. It takes a tremendous amount of labor to sustain a community that expands and contracts like lungs breathing the crisp air around a tiny parking lot on the slopes of a mountain. I can't name all of the names. I wish I could. But the specific labor that I want to highlight in the little bit of my 10 minutes I have left is the leadership of ceremony, or aha, by kumu, like kumupua case here. Kumupua kanahele, kumu ke kuhi kiaʻi Kanaka Maoli o Haiʻililani, and others. These wahine, these kumu lead aha, ceremony filled with chant, dance, observation, and reconnection 3 times a day, as Auntie Pua talked about, morning, noon, and evening, to refocus people's mana toward the Mauna and to recommit ourselves to the kapu aloha that Auntie Pua explained so beautifully. And I won't be able to do it any more justice, so I'll just say that a kapu can be a prohibition. Typically, kapu regulate human behavior in the face of what is sacred. Mountain summits, water supplies, fisheries, menstrual blood, great leaders, and other sources of life. Kapu remind Kanaka how to act in light of our place in the more than human family that is our world. Historically, oral pronouncements, kapu can be seen as a type of law. So sometimes the popular media describes kapu aloha as a code of conduct. And I suggest that we understand kapu aloha and the aha that invest and reinforce the authority of this kapu instead as enactments of Kanaka jurisdiction on the Mauna and beyond. Here I'm referring to jurisdiction in the capacious sense that Shiri Pasternak writes about in her book Grounded Authority, where jurisdiction is, quote, the authority to have authority, the very substance of what authorizes the law, end quote. Pasternak describes how a dense patchwork of settler state divisions crowd Algonquin ancestral territories and assert settler sovereignty through what she calls a kind of jurisdictional commotion that works to undermine, erase, and choke out the exercise of Indigenous jurisdiction. We see this kind of settler state confusion among the occupying state's micro-governing authorities on Mauna Kea, who have often been perplexed themselves about which one of them controls the road, which one of them can construct a gate, which one of them should arrest us. But jurisdiction is not derived from or an extension of state sovereignty. As Pasternak talks about, jurisdiction is a practice, and we might think about it from a Kanaka perspective as the active vesting of mana in place, the practices that undergird and construct our sovereign authority and political leadership in the first place. So what is happening on and around Mauna Kea is more than a struggle to stop the 30-meter telescope from being built on our summit. It is the rebirth of Kanaka jurisdiction on a scale that we have not seen for literally 2 centuries. 2019, right now, marks exactly 200 years since the breaking of the Aikapu, a set of rules related to food preparation, eating, and gender that structured relations between humans and deities, between men and women. In her new book, Noelani Arista argues that, quote, the toppling of the Aikapu was not the end of all kapu. She goes on to explain that the end of the Aikapu took along with it the schedule of rituals regulating the pace of people's agricultural lives. The lives of Hawaiians were no longer structured by the ritual calendar. Lives were marked to a different time, end quote. In short, Kanaka began to transition from ceremonies focused on the rhythms of our natural/spiritual world to rituals and social events focused on markets, on chronological and biblical time. 200 years after the Ainoa, we are reinvesting authority in our own kapu through rituals conducted daily, led by women like Kumupua Case, and in other places that are connected to the Mauna, such as the aha that are held on the UH Manoa campus. As far as I know, this is the first time in 2 centuries that Kanaka have invested and authorized a governing kapu with public ceremony, and it is happening daily for over 4 months now. This is nothing short of historic. And I would venture to say that just as we 200 years later remember the moment of the Ainoa, that 200 years from now, our descendants will remember the kapu aloha that women like this are leading us in. As both Arista and Kauanui demonstrate in their recent books, the 19th century shift from oral kapu to written law was provoked by the need to control white foreigners who were violently demanding sexual access to Hawaiian women's bodies. In light of that history and the ongoing heteropatriarchal machinations of US occupation in Hawaii, including the assertions of settler state jurisdictions on Mauna Kea, it is incredibly significant that Manawahine and Manamahu as assertions of Hawaiian power are central in the Kukiaʻi Mauna movement and the reassertions of Kanaka jurisdiction. In fact, I would argue that this is a key to why we are winning. We are finally celebrating and embracing once again the political leadership of Kanaka, unbound by a Western binary gender system. Yesterday at the noon aha on the UH Manoa campus, we closed the season of Ku and welcomed the Akua Lono, who immediately greeted us with a light rain and with gusts of wind. 3 kiaʻi, Lanakila Manguel, Havane Rios, and Kaumakaiwa Kanaka Ole, all non-binary and queer Kanaka, who have been central to this movement, came as guardians of Kukiaʻi Mauna, the Akua, the deity who was born during this struggle. I got chicken skin thinking about how these are the leaders that our students and children will tell stories about. And I wondered what it also means that the embodied representatives of Lono, who presides over a time of peace instead of combat, were all Kane. These are the ways the resurgence of our indigenous culture is disrupting colonial genders. On Mauna Kea and in communities radiating out from and inspired by our sacred Mauna, a nation grounded in Hawaiian cultural and jurisdictional practice is rising, like the kupu-kupu ferns growing from cracks in the black lava and unfurling toward the sun. E mau ke ea o ka aina. By continuing to assert our own forms of jurisdiction, Kanaka undermined the self-proclaimed sovereignty of the occupying settler state over our lands. Rather, we remind ourselves, he ali'i ka aina, he kaua ke Kanaka, the land is chief and we are servants. And as I have learned so powerfully from Auntie Pua and the example that she sets for us, we should rejoice and celebrate in the opportunity to renew our connections and our relationships with our aina, such as the struggles that we see happening not only on Mauna Kea, but also at Kahuku, at Hunana Niho, and right here in Waikiki. Mahalo.
Is this, it's on? Yeah. Aloha mai kako. I'm Candace Fujikane, and I too want to honor the incredibly inspiring work of the panelists and their loving commitment to Mauna Kea. On Monday, July 15, 2019, the kupuna, the elders, chose to stand on the front line to protect Mauna Kea. And I'm inspired by Dean Osorio, John Osorio, the Dean of the Hawaii Nui Akea School of Hawaiian Knowledge, who stood on that front line, while his daughter, Professor Heoli Meleikalani Osorio, was chained to the cattle guard up the road with a the chair of the political science department, Noelani Gujir Kaopua. And as all of this was happening, Ilima Long was one of the foundational organizers who helped to set up Puʻuhonua or Puʻuhuluhulu. And she was directing the protectors, and she has been one of the powerful forces establishing and growing the Puʻuhonua at tremendous personal sacrifice. She's a graduate student. She's a graduate student and a mother and a labor union organizer, all of the above. So while the University of Hawaii administration has betrayed students and faculty by backing the TMT, my colleagues here on this panel and other faculty and students at the University of Hawaii have continued to stand for the Mauna. On Wednesday, July 17, 2019, 1,000 of us bore witness to the arrests of 33 kupuna and their 5 kako'o, their assistants. We watched as the state officers zip-tied their hands and led them to the police vans. We all cried for them, but they had told us to stand back, to bear witness as the whole world did to what the occupying state does to Kanaka Maoli, who stand for sacred lands. The kupuna made the decision to be arrested because they needed to protect the sacredness of the Mauna, the Wau Akua, the realm of the deities, or the Akua are the elements, as Pualani Kanahele explained to us. So whenever we talk about the Akua, it's popularly translated as gods, but they really are the elemental forms. There are 400,000 Akua, each naming elemental phenomena that are specific to different places in Hawaii. On Mauna Kea, the Akua, the elemental forms, are Poliahu, the snow, Lilinoi, the mists, Kahopokane, the thunderous beating of the lightning white kapa in the stormy skies, and Waiau, the lake near the summit. In the love story of Kūkahauʻula and Poliahu, we see the hydrological cycle of water on the Mauna. Kūkahauʻula, the ali'i, travels to Hawaii on the first eastern rays of the sun and tries to approach Poliahu, but he fails to ask permission first. And he is warded off by her attendants, Lilinoi, the mist, and Lihau, the chilling frost, the biting cold kipu'upu'u rains. Mo'oinanea, the reptilian water guardian of Lake Waiau, sees the rainbow created by Kūkahauʻula's cloak as he sails across the sky as a sign of the truth of his love and permits him safe passage across Waiau. And when he approaches Poliahu, he drapes his pink cloak around her shoulders and wraps her in his embrace. That is what we see when we look at the cinder cones on the Mauna, wrapped in snow that turn pink at dawn and at sunset. Kūkahauʻula loving Poliahu 2 times a day. This is also the story of the sun's pink glow on the snows causing Poliahu's heart to melt, and these waters travel underground across the mountain to 5 aquifers that feed the island. These and many other mo'olelo map out the locations of the springs on the Mauna. Mauna Kea is sacred. To protect it from human activities that would contaminate these waters, the TMT proposes to house 2 5,000-gallon tanks underground, each capable of holding 17 tons of liquid, one storing toxic chemical wastewater, so that's 17 tons of toxic chemical wastewater from the washing of the mirrors, and another one storing 17 tons of human wastewater. So half of each tank, 17 tons of toxic liquids, is proposed to be trucked down the Mauna once a month, down the steep, inclined, the curving, unpaved road. And the environmental impact statement recognizes that this would be the cause of a toxic spill. Kealoha Pishiota goes on to explain that the settler state has no jurisdiction in the Wau Akua. And this is also thinking about what Noelani is saying, that the kanawai that Kanaka have, the laws that they have regarding the protection of the Mauna, are based on their observations of the elements, based on the laws of the elements. We know that human laws are fallible. The civil rights movement sought to change such unjust laws. The kupuna show how the state is breaking its own conservation district laws while they are standing for the kanawai, the laws of the elements. And how do we know these laws? Through generations of the kupuna's practice of kilo, careful observation of the elemental phenomena, so much so that they could name 400,000 elemental phenomena, interlocking ecological systems. Through these practices of kilo, kupuna and cultural practitioners are able to forecast phenomena and to turn changes in climate into ways of growing greater abundance. The Papaku Makavalu team of researchers look to the oli and the mele, the chants and the songs, to document ancestral practices of kilo. And as Noenoi Silva has pointed out, the Olelo Hawaiʻi Hawaiian language newspapers have been a key archive for 19th century intellectual traditions, as well as the oral traditions that they're based on. And her work has inspired Kanaka, who are now growing the Lāhui at Puʻuhonua or Puʻuhuluhulu. Researchers like Ku'ule Higashi Kanahele have found that the oli documents that the water on the Mauna comes not just from rain or snow, but from fog drip. So she identifies Poli'ahu's sister, Kalau akolea, the fronds of the akolea fern that captures the fog drip. That's the source of water on the Mauna, that there's the pohaku on the Mauna. The rocks actually capture fog drip. In contrast to this wealth of Kanaka Maoli knowledge about the Mauna, the TMT has done no comprehensive hydrological study of the TMT site. And yet the hydrologist who testified as the UH expert witness maintained that the TMT will not have an impact on the aquifer. He admitted on cross-examination that he does not know where the groundwater is. And yet, of course, the TMT will not impact the aquifer. But that kind of obfuscation, that kind of misdirection and misleading has been the MO for the University of Hawaii in the contested case hearing. So this is a conception of government that's based on the laws of the elements, critical in this era of climate change, where human juridical systems have failed the earth. As I argue in my work, indigenous economies of abundance will survive the changes on this earth that capitalist economies of scarcity will not. Restoration of indigenous land bases is key to the restoration of the planet. Those of us who are not Kanaka have come to identify ourselves as settler allies, and I know the term settler is controversial for many people who are now using Jody Bird's term, and I thought Jody's right here in the front, Jody Bird's term, arrivant. And what I wanted to point to is that we also should remember that Bird describes not only settler colonialism, but what she calls a quote-unquote arrivant colonialism. So what is an arrivant colonialism? And that brings us back to the question of our responsibilities to the lands where we live, whether we identify as settler or arrivant. Being a settler ally also means an opposition to all forms of oppression mobilized by the occupying or settler state, whether it's anti-Black racism, racism against migrants, heteronormativity and heteropatriarchy, anti-trans discrimination, Islamophobia, or what Rob Nixon refers to as the slow violence of the environmentalism of the poor. The value for me of the term settler ally is in articulating the simultaneity of our overlapping positionalities. Noelani Goodyear Kaopua in her work suggests that there's a usefulness to the term settler aloha aina, those of us who care for the land without losing sight of our settler privileges. We can move from settler ally to settler aloha aina because being a settler and being an aloha aina are not mutually exclusive. I argue that settler aloha aina is rooted in Kanaka Maoli intelligence and has its own capaciousness, one that grapples with the social processes of settler occupation and one that encompasses the imaginative possibilities for our collaborative work on ea, a word meaning life, breath, sovereignty, and a rising of a land-based Lāhui. As settler aloha aina, we must do the work of decolonization by taking on the truly difficult work that indigenous peoples do to protect lands from the occupying state, at the same time that we engage in the restoration work that will grow a Lāhui that will survive beyond the occupying state. So it's short-term and long-term at the same time. I've stood for Mauna Kea since 2011, and much of that work has been done in toxic, juridical, settler state spaces, testifying to the ways that the state breaks its own laws, standing for the Mauna against law enforcement officers armed with tear gas. And as Settler Aloha Aina, we share in the joy, too, of these decolonial practices. As Puʻuhonua has taught us, we stand for the Mauna in kapu aloha with joy. She teaches us that in the mele malana mai ka'u, the line, ohohia I ka hana ana aku e, reminds us that we rejoice in the work of standing together, caring for each other and caring for the earth as we practice ea. And in this way, this work will be intergenerational. Thank you. So at this point, we don't have a lot of time. I'm thinking maybe we could take 10 minutes for Q&A from the audience, and I can come around, bring the mic to you. Oh, huh? Oh, we may not have 10 minutes. I don't know. Can we not do 10 minutes? Oh.
Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. So if anybody has a question or a comment, please keep it brief and be clear to whom you're addressing it. Does anybody? Okay, great. Just kidding. Anyone? No questions or comments? You're still digesting all that amazing mana and knowledge and yeah, can we just give them another round of applause, please? Okay, if everybody's feeling a little shy right now, what we'll do instead is we'll adjourn to the reception downstairs. A lot of these folks will be coming down, and we invite you to maybe engage people in conversation, ask your questions then. But thank you so much for coming tonight, and we'll see you at the reception downstairs in the book exhibit area. Okay.